Hi everyone, very good afternoon and welcome to this masterclass stroke panel discussion that we have here on the topic thriving on data. We have a fairly interesting panel with us. This is powered largely by Capgemini. So thank you to Sudhir and Frank for helping us put this out together. We also have Cyrus, who is the managing director for IDC, and Shameek, who is a formerly a banker, but now with TruEra and running the business in South and Southeast Asia. So a warm welcome to all of you. Before we dive into the panel, actually, I would like to pull up a screen. And this is something that Capgemini had worked on while doing the Singapore FinTech Festival. And once I have it up, I'll tell you why I'm having this screen up. So this is broadly the topic that we're going to talk about. And a lot of the conversations that we're going to have today are around these 5 points. The reason I have this screen up is so that whoever is there in the audience and would want to pick up one of these points and have a question for the wonderful panel that we have with us, the folks that we have with us, uh, jot it down, maybe put it in the chat. My colleagues Sumit and Nitesh, who are here as well, they'll note it down. And once we are done with the discussion, which will kind of be a back and forth and not exactly a panel, but an individual chat, we'll have thoughts. And then eventually when we conclude and make it a little bit interesting to ask, will in the meanwhile dive into the conversation. Yeah. So just a few icebreaker quotes before we get to some questions, some conversations. So I'm going to read out a few. And data is the new oil is something that anyone and everyone who's been working on the broader realm of data, machine learning, and artificial intelligence has heard umpteen times. But few more that I would like to kind of quickly touch upon, and that will kind of dive into the conversation I'm going to first get into with Frank and Sudhir from Team Capgemini. In God we trust, all others bring data. That's an interesting one. I have picked up about 5 of them from about 20 interesting ones that I saw. The second one that I really like was where there is data smoke, there is business fire. The other one I would pick is data really powers everything that we do. Um, no great marketing decisions have ever been made on qualitative data. And the last one is without big data, you're deaf and blind and in the middle of a freeway. One wouldn't want to be that, but that kind of brings me to have
Ajay, can
Frank
I add?
and Sudhir from Team Capgemini.
Ajay, can I add
Go for it.
one in the lighter vein? It's from my 6-year-old daughter who's only grown up with her dad having
Go
data
for
all
it.
around. Hers is data, data, data. What is this thing that you keep talking about? So for those of us whose job involves data, I'm afraid it's a very boring journey for our family, at least until they're old enough to understand what it's about.
But thank you for bringing that one. Indeed, I mean, there are a lot of questions that we can get answered from all of you over here, from our wonderful guests who are attending as well. So Sudhir and Frank, the topic I'm going to chat with you about is the past, present, and future of a data strategy. But before I do that, if both of you can quickly introduce yourselves, the work that you do at Capgemini, that would be wonderful. So over to you, Sudhir and Frank.
Frank, you go first.
Thank you, Sudhir, and welcome to everyone on the call. So I'm Frank Windoloski. I run our insights and data practice for Capgemini for Asia Pacific. So as part of my role, I have the privilege of seeing and assisting with our clients across Japan and China and Southeast Asia and Australia with all of their journeys and complexities with data. And of course, importantly, how they consume and use and leverage that data, whether it be through advanced analytics or artificial intelligence. So that's my role and scope of what I work on.
Thank you, Frank. Hello, everyone. My name is Sudhir Pai. I am Chief Technology and Innovation Officer for Financial Services, Global Business at Capgemini. And part of my job is to look out for all the interesting things that are happening in the data world. And along with my co-panelist here, we have spent a fair bit of time, and as well with Ajay, and with his startup ventures now and in the past. So look forward to all kinds of conversations and sharing and learning from all of you today.
Thank you, Sudhir, and thank you, Frank, for introducing yourselves. So, getting into this conversation of the past, present, and future of data strategy, and let us begin with a few years back from where we are today. And Frank, given your background and your role within Capgemini and the clients that you work with, I'm sure that it has been an exciting and fun journey seeing how data and the data strategy has evolved. So if you went back a few years, I mean, and the same customers or same clients that you're dealing with today, what was the motivation behind a data strategy, and what was it that you as Capgemini, when you were interacting with them, needed to be in place for actually implementing a data strategy?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and we've seen the market evolve quite a bit, and I might sort of answer from kind of 2 or 3 different lenses. So one thing that we've seen evolved is maybe in the space around maybe we'll call it data quality, and if we go back 5 years or maybe even 4 years, people referred to it just as this: data quality. Is my data accurate? And as we sort of look maybe 2 years ago, people started referring to it not so much as is it data quality, but is it data trust? Can we trust the data? So it's not just a matter of is it accurate, it's can we trust it within our organization? And of course, now today, the current topic is gone a bit beyond trust. And the question is the data ethical? So we've seen in this data governance space the strategic implications for companies going from, I just need to make sure my data is accurate, so I'm not arguing in the boardroom about whether the report is correct, to is the data trusted, to now is the data ethical. And I think in addition, we've also seen a parallel change where, again, if we sort of go back 5 years, it was more about dashboards and around centers of excellence, and can we actually get people to produce dashboards in days rather than weeks, or months? Can we get more robust access and self-service within the data? And if we sort of go three years ago, it was much more around advanced analytics, the sort of advent of substantial algorithms that were in production being used for organizations to do terribly complicated things. And now, of course, it's all about artificial intelligence. So the vehicles in which we actually use the data strategy, so to speak, becomes much more around consumption, and the evolution of simple dashboarding and reporting to advanced analytics to now artificial intelligence. These are kind of the trends that we've seen evolve in the strategies around data that are being used in the enterprise.
Speaking with my mute button on, that wasn't intelligent on my part. But Sudhir, if you want to add to what Frank just mentioned, and in addition to that, what are the real business benefits that have actually resulted from a data strategy, from what you see around the different BFSI clients that you deal with on a global front?
Thank you, Ajay, and just building on Frank's conversation. So a couple of points or thoughts comes to my mind. One is, of course, the technology that we have today and the maturity of technology is very different to a few years back. So what it means is, the entire data value chain, be it how you store data, how you retrieve data, or how you transmit data, etc. So everything has changed. So it's a big shift towards the access to the vast amount of data, which is helping us today, which was not the case a few years back. So technology is playing a big role in my view. Secondly, data for a number of years always has been the center of discussion for IT department, obviously, right? So for a number of years, for all of us who have gone through those projects, right? So it was always an IT project, which is no longer the case, right? So today, data is viewed as something which is quite relevant for business.
Have we lost Sudhir?
Yeah,
I
looks
think
like
so.
that.
I think so.
Yeah.
Maybe
Frank, do
take
you want
over.
to? Yeah.
Yeah, I might and I won't try to finish Sudhir's thought. We'll let him come back and complete his thinking. But my perspective when it comes to I suppose the business benefits that we're seeing from the data landscape. Again, if I sort of use the theme that I was talking about before, if we look at 5 years ago, it was a lot about how we leverage data to reduce cost within organizations. So can we take workflows that used to be 7 steps and reduce them to 3 steps with smarter data? Can we take compliance processes that require 100 people to complete them and do them with 30 people? So it was very much around cost out. And I think maybe 3 years ago, we saw a big shift towards upsell and cross sell. So lots of sophistication with next best offer, lots of sophistication with, more the realization of the vision of one-to-one marketing and better customer intimacy. And now I think if we look today, we're actually seeing organizations, interestingly, look to data for disruptive strategies. So how do they actually use data to create a new business and sort of, disrupt a market by creating a new business from an existing domain, or they disrupt the market that they're in themselves by having a data product that differentiates and shifts the sort of normal landscape of the ecosystem. So we're actually seeing more disruptive business benefit now because the sophistication is stronger.
Sorry,
Thank
I
you.
had
Thanks, Frank.
bad
Sudhir, if
I
you
had a
want
bad
to
connection.
continue.
That's fine. I think Frank has covered. I think
Not a problem.
yeah, where just maybe one small comment to build on is going back to the business model, right? So increasingly data is now used to figure out what are the new growth opportunities, which was not been the case a few years back, and what it means is it is opening up new partnership avenues, right? So we have seen financial services today opening up partnership purely on the distribution channel, acquiring new customers, and those things are possible because of the access of data that is available. So of course the growth trajectory originated through data is becoming mainstream than just the efficiency trajectory, which has been the case for a few years.
Great. Thank you, Sudhir, for that, and Frank for chiming in when we lost Sudhir. So that brings me to the third and the last question of what next or the future. And I think no better time than now to talk about survive and thrive. I mean, the way the world has been in the last 12 to 15 months. So from a Capgemini perspective, I mean, what do you want to be advising or telling your clients that you work with, as well as within the organization, should they be doing in the future to ensure that, and because we're talking on the topic of thriving on data, ensure that on an organization which is built on the foundation, or business that is built on the foundation of strong data, how do you ensure that you thrive and you're not just surviving?
So maybe just a comment, Frank. Feel free to jump in. So thriving on data, as you showed the 5 areas in the very beginning, is what from Capgemini's perspective we started to narrow it down. There is still a lot of work to be done when it comes to enterprise readiness, modernization sort of area. However, there would be more emphasis, I would imagine, around the value of data, which is the monetization part of data going forward. Now, 2 other comments that always comes to my mind when you say when you apply this thriving on data lens. One is there's going to be increasing focus around portability of data. So how you make sure different complex ecosystems, both business and technology ecosystem, will leverage, share data seamlessly. That's probably one of the big area and a big bottleneck, assuming all kinds of regulatory compliance, consent, privacy will have to be addressed. And secondly, if you look at data landscape today and the sheer architecture, it is getting more and more complex. The number of players in data field, be it from data ingestion to data platforms to, there are hundreds today. So how you go about the whole journey, which one you narrow down, what you want to do yourself, what you like to have partners to do, it's still a fair bit of complexity involved in that space. So I would think these will be the priority for us to reap the benefits out of it.
Maybe if I just build on that, I think the other important word that comes up for me now is change. The world around data is constantly changing. So we see huge amounts of innovation in the startup community, in the space around AI and algorithms and different ways we can interpret data. But we also see a huge amount of innovation in the startup ecosystems in regards to the data creators. And the data creators aren't always just people who are curating an existing data set. They're innovators that are building new products for the purpose of creating data. So products that actually generate data, which can actually allow others in the ecosystem to do more efficient business models. So this type of innovation requires an organization embracing a pathway on data to be constantly looking, constantly having their ear to the market as to what's changing. Because if they go 3 months, the world will shift, and they can't sort of go through a slow motion approach. 3 months is like 3 years. There's so much change in the market right now.
No, thank you so much for those thoughts, Sudhir and Frank. And Sudhir, like you rightly pointed out around the portability of data. I mean, can't be more relevant to a market like India, where we are talking of Digi Sahmati and OSIN as architectures. And I think that will go a long way in not only kind of seeing the next gen of probably fintechs coming about, but also in terms of how the market is addressed. I think it definitely is going to make a huge change or dent in. For that, Frank and Sudhir, with that, I'd like to move to Cyrus Daruwala, who's from IDC. And before I jump in with my question, Cyrus, if you can briefly introduce yourself and the work that you do at IDC, that would be awesome for the audience.
Sure. Thanks, Ajay. Thanks, Frank and Sudhir. Great to see you guys all. I wear 2 hats in the IDC IDG world. One is the financial services and fintech advisory business, which is a complement with what Capgemini does. We have approximately 260 banks and insurance companies who are constantly running RFIs and RFPs through us. That's one of the things that we do. And the other hat, of course, is the IDG Capital, which is one of the world's largest private equity and venture capital out of China. And big ticket items like Baidu and Flipkart and everything else that comes under it. So that's one of the hats that I wear with regards to assessment and criteria with FinTech and InsurTech. So IDG Capital, IDC Advisory, and everything else in between which is of interest, like data. So, yeah. Thanks, Ajay.
Great, thanks. Thank you for the introduction. I'm sure that there'll be many people wanting to connect with you and write to you. So Cyrus, I read a fairly recent IDC publication on the theme of modern data foundation and data-driven decisions. And going through that report or publication, I came up with a question for you. Is to, I mean, how do you build, run, and expand a data culture within an organization, and how do you go about measuring it and continuing to build on it? I mean, continuing on the topic of thriving on data, I think it kind of segues into this question.
Sure. And I'm sure our panelist, Shameek, who's a former banker, he will jump in as well with the observations. Ajay, the thing is, data is not really new to any institution, any bank, any insurance company, any manufacturer, airlines, brokerage houses. I mean, we're sitting on copious amounts of data. But the realization that data is not just static and meant for archives so that EMC and Dell can make money, that came around, I think, sometime in 2018. When I think, or 2019, Sudhir and I were toying with the idea of this whole data monetization. So what happens when banking or insurance becomes a commodity? And honestly, products don't vary that much. What you end up doing is, what is an incremental stream of revenue that I can tap on? And this incremental revenue stream happened to be existing data. So how do you run it and how do you monetize from it? It's quite simple. You identify the various pools of data, and between Capgemini and I, we have this framework that we've created, which is very robust, very solid, operating in some of the largest firms in the world right now. And what it does helps you identify various sources of data. Simple. 90% of the institutions, as you saw, don't really have a very accurate accord of all of the data repositories. What type of data? Transactional data, payment data, MIS data, regulatory data, reporting data. These are all just data pools that are correlated. You apply what you would call a standard ETL and standardization of that data practice so that you can have it into large repositories, call it a data lake, call it a data warehouse, whatever it is. But then more importantly, you start applying business logic and rules behind it. This is transactional data that's meant for archiving. This is live data, customer data that we can use to make offers in near real time, what DBS is doing, what Standard Chartered is doing, what Zopa, the lending company out of Spain, is doing, and so on and so forth, or what Bajaj Allianz is doing. Then you farm out this data into different ownerships. The CFO, when she or he runs the simulation, is looking at the same set of data. The governance, risk, and compliance head, who's doing the reporting, is looking at the same set of data. The business unit owner, who wants to go to market with a new product or a new loan or a new insurance, is looking at the same set of data, historical data. That's how we created this framework. Where does the data sit? What is the applicability of this data and where it can be used? And who can we farm it out to so that this big data becomes live, usable, monetizable, if that's the word. And then people actually look at this whole identify, run, and use that data. So that's what we created. And as I said, everybody from stockbrokers to exchanges, to banks, to insurance companies, automobile, aviation, everybody started jumping onto that bandwagon. So that's what data monetization and live data means, the new set of data rules. Back at you, Ajay.
Great. Thanks for that, Cyrus. Also, I remember when we were having the conversation prepping for this, we did have a chat moving away from your IDC hat, or you're talking of InsurTech and bunch of examples, anything that you want to kind of talk about that?
Sure, sure. So one of the companies, and this is the personal investments that we've made, not IDG. Of course, IDG is dealing with the big boys. Baidu is nothing more than an extremely large multi-hundred zettabyte repository of data because it's a search engine like Google. In India, with Manish Patel, I've invested in a company called MSwipe. We are live in 500,000 merchants across India, and we're collecting a copious amount of Paytm data, customer data, debit data, credit data. All of that data needs to be analyzed and farmed back to the owners of the data. So I want to see what my transaction history is. In fact, I want to go to the extent in saying within Pune or Mumbai, what are other 50-year-old, I don't know, retirees buying? I don't know, it's just an API consumption. And it empowers me to make the right decision, whether I'm buying an air fryer or a TV. That comes from data sets. The other example, we were just talking offline, is how Bajaj has started selling bikes, which is their bread and butter business, to people based on their data, their location, their requirement. In insurance speak, a very simple data omitted from your mobile phone enables me to track how you drive, where you go, how many times you accelerated, what rules did you break. All of this is an API orchestration layer, and I extrapolate data from various data sources in this API orchestration layer, so that when I look at my phone and I finished a trip, I get a score. Cyrus, this 20-kilometer trip was well driven and you didn't break any rules. You get 3 points, 5 points. Collectively, at the end of the year, if I'm a very good driver, safe driver, my premium comes down. I get incentives from my insurance company. Again, use of data. What am I doing? I'm monetizing, unlocking that data. So there are, Ajay, thousands of use cases on how data, which is static and dead and archived, can be livened up, analyzed, infused with some other third-party APIs so that you can give the right offer to the right people at the right time. And I control my data. The magical word in data is not water and fluidity, it's opt-in. If I have opted in, everybody can use and see my data within limit. If I have not opted in, then I'm closed off and I won't be able to get the benefits. So that's how we are seeing all of this data. And businesses that I've invested in are, I mean, it could be hardware like MSwipe or, telematics like Zenson, but it's predominantly based on data. And that's the crux of the business.
Very interesting. The point that you make around how data can be leveraged better, and also the specific example you gave about around MSwipe. Interesting thing. Just this morning, I was having a chat with a VC funded company which has recently partnered with MSwipe on tackling this exact same problem. So I'll connect with you offline on that. On a
Sure.
separate.
Actually, Eduardo from B Capital right here in Singapore has invested almost 50 million now. So MSwipe has reached about 150 million. And we are growing exponentially. Again, it's very hardware centric, but at the back, if you see the apps and the collection of the units, it's all predominantly data. Payment data, transaction data, buying data, historical data, trends data, market data. All of that is nothing but a data infusion orchestration layer predominantly.
Absolutely. I mean, having a hardware POS touch point and not using the brainwave that the software or the data produces, I guess that's a very different business.
True.
But thank you so much, Cyrus, for your insights. And with that, I'll move on to Shameek. Shameek, before I get my question over to you, if you can briefly introduce yourself and the work that you do at TruEra.
Sure. I used to be, until the end of last year, the Group Chief Data Officer at Standard Chartered Bank. Played that role for many years, about 7 years, and led a lot of the work around both the defensive and offensive side of data analytics and AI there. Starting early this year, I joined a startup out of California, though I'm still based in Singapore, that is focused entirely on AI trustworthiness. So we don't build models, we don't provide MLOps solution. We provide a software platform to analyze, understand, and monitor machine learning models with the view to making them explainable, to addressing issues around bias and fairness, to looking at stability of models and whether the model drift is justified, etc. So in other words, thinking about the quality of AI, but not in a consulting or legal sense, but very much focused on software. And I head strategy and run financial services for that company worldwide.
Thank you,
Ajay.
Shameek, for giving a brief background about yourself and the work that you do at TruEra. So my question actually points to one of the points that we have in the Thriving on Data strategy document, or the Unleashing the Potential document that Capgemini has put out, and it is on the concept of good times. I mean, gone are good times is good times. So with the kind of ongoing global pandemic, I mean, every business, and this also kind of touches upon the topic that we were chatting on before we went live, and you're talking of the examples of Singapore and bunch of other places like Vietnam that Sumit was talking about, that every business is competing for eyeballs and the purchases that are made on their digital channels. And if not purely digital, it is kind of hybrid, which makes a data-based approach all the more the need of the hour. And for any of these businesses to kind of successfully stand out, they need to understand the basics around data optimization, gathering kind of the relevant customer information, responding to real-time feedback, reducing inefficiencies, diminishing trust. I mean, addressing that issue. So, which brings us to the topic of good times, and touching on 3 points: the expandability of data, the auditability of data, and ethics associated with data. If you can, from your holistic journey in the broader realm of data, I mean, as a former banker, as a chief data officer, and now with the work that you're doing at TruEra, if you can walk the audience through these 3 points. And
So I'll need to ask Sudhir first what expandability of data means. I mean, I'm not sure what that actually refers. I don't know, Sudhir, if you can quickly.
It's explainability.
It should be explainability, right? Okay, then we're fine. So then it's explainability of algorithms. So I mean, it's Friday evening for most of us, so I'm going to not talk theory. I'm going to give you 2 stories. Both happened to me personally. So rather than talking like a banker, let me talk like an individual. One of them is, I think, back in 2015 or 16. I got a call in my office. My assistant, at that time I used to have an assistant. I was in a company, not in a startup. She said, "This guy is trying to reach you since morning. Can you take the call?" I took it. And there was this abusive guy from a outbound call center in India saying, "You've taken 10,000 rupees from Barclay card in 2009. We have your record, and you must pay it back." So this was a collection agent, and I think they had bought Barclays' old portfolio when Barclays, I think, sold their business in India. And this guy was persistent. He was abusive. He found somehow my email on public. I was a public speaker. And even bizarrely, he sent me the original mail application of some other person called Shameek Kundu. He claimed, despite calling me as Chief Data Officer of Standard Chartered, finding my LinkedIn profile, he claimed that I was a call center agent at Daksh, which I think is IBM has bought since then, in Pune in 2009. And I had taken a loan from Barclays. And here is the CDD KYC document. Here is the loan application. Here is the bill. And you clearly must have taken the money. So I kind of didn't know how to react. Anyway, finally, for those of you who might have met my assistant, she is very formidable. I merely pointed him to my assistant, and somehow it disappeared. But it was a very interesting experience, because what happened was that you had this completely unholy mix of a little bit of entity resolution, which if you read about it, it's very posh. But here somebody took Shameek Kundu. My spelling is reasonably unique, although I have another story on that. And I'll only tell stories, so don't worry, I won't talk anything else. But it's reasonably unique spelling. Most Shameeks are with an I. Shameek with 2 E's, and then Kundu is reasonably unique. There's one other guy. So this algorithm decided this must be the person. And then on top of that, you had this human with an incentive to say, it doesn't matter. The machine has said this, my incentive is entirely about getting money out of this guy. So I will do everything possible. Now, this is Shameek Kundu, Chief Data Officer of a global bank with not unreasonable amount of influence to do things. Now, imagine if I was not that, and if I was somebody in India with a more common name. And that just brought to me how the unholy mix of lack of privacy, algorithms that somehow, this is not even AI, this must have been a fuzzy logic algorithm, algorithms that match stuff, and then, an inexorable lack of protection just can be a nightmare. So that's number one. Number two, for most of you, if you still look at Shameek Kundu on Google, you might find my profile coming up right, but my picture appears with a Bengali rock singer's picture, who actually has an album, by the way. I have tried three times, not kidding. I have tried 3 times approaching. I know somebody in Google's regional offices here. No avail. The algorithm just keeps going back to Shameek Kundu, Bengali rock singer, right? Even though in the next, so there's zero connection with the two. And then the third one, sadly, I see there are, we are very, actually, no, there is one lady here, and please don't take this in any negative way, but I always bring this up as the father of 2 daughters. If you go to Google, at least in Singapore, and search for policemen in images, you'll find images of policemen. If you go and search for policewoman, then on the 10th image or the 15th image, you'll see pictures of strippers, right? This one is serious. Now, all of these 3 stories I'm telling for only one reason. This is not something that happens. This is not something that happens only in some kind of very woke Western world. This impacts everybody. I mean, many of the audience here are from India. You imagine how you've already seen some of the issues with some of the fintechs that have caused trouble by kind of hounding people, following unethical practices. Now, if you're unethical to begin with, frankly, you should be dealt with the law. The real problem is not the purely unethical ones. The real problem is people who intend to do things right, but just don't understand what they are unleashing. They confuse correlation with causality and then claim ridiculous things like, I can tell you, I do my keystrokes on my phone very differently depending on what time of the day it is. So any idiot who tells me that how I do my keystrokes on a loan application determines how creditworthy I am is exactly that. And yet there are real life fintechs who claim that they can do excellent credit assessment in all faith based on what pace you typed into this. So my word of caution is data is the new oil, but also in the bad way. Data is the new oil in the sense of being absolutely toxic, particularly when used with ill understood algorithms. And this was so important for me. It kicked off. Now these were the personal stories. If I go and I talk professional briefly, if we cannot understand what data is flowing into our systems, what models, AI or otherwise, are doing what to that data, frankly, all of this is built on sand. You'll have a ton of nonsense coming out. And so that is the key pieces. Now, why I joined this particular company after a lot of work with the MAS, the Bank of England, and other regulators is because they are focused. I won't do a sales pitch today, but they're entirely focused on how do you build software that actually analyzes models and gets that kind of information on, what is driving the model. Is there unjust bias in there? Is the model unstable? Is there a lot of overfitting? I see quite a few fintechs on the panel. You'll know all of this if you use machine learning models. So I'll stop there, Ajay. Hopefully that gives an overview.
Shameek, my takeaway from all of this, we're going to call you Shameek the rock star.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
No, thank you so much, Shameek, for those insights coming from real life stories, but also, I mean, kind of a feeling of mea culpa over here, because I think when you brought up the point around diversity, and that takes me back to a year or so when we actually did something focused, a 2-day summit focused on AI. And one of the things that while we were researching different topics and different themes to speak about, one of the very interesting topics we came around was that when you look at the role of humans in furthering artificial intelligence, I think one of the things that we need to look at is also diversity, and a diversity of ideas, perspectives, ways to think about problems, avoiding biases, and probably that's where I guess women in AI I think becomes something very important to address. However, the kind of telling fact is that, I mean, if you look at AI research being authored by women globally, it's under 15%. And even if you look, and women since 1990 who have published AI research between these three organizations, on an average is around 13%. And other than University of Washington, none of the 35 institutions in US for AI research have more than 25% listed as AI
So,
authored by women.
Ajay,
So
I'm really sorry to interject, but I'll make one point. I mean, first of all, you don't need to be, I would completely challenge that you need to be an AI specialist to ask the right questions. I would go the other extreme and say you should absolutely not know anything about AI, just like I don't, by the way. I've never written a model in my life. And you should be able to ask the frank questions to say, how is this model working? And tell me why it is. Yeah, I'm an idiot. I don't understand this model. I'm not an idiot, but I'm a complete novice to AI. Now you explain to me, because if you cannot explain this to me, I cannot accept. I see a question from Pritha. Pritha, one of the reasons why people don't accept automated solutions and insist on human touch is because they haven't seen enough evidence that this thing works. So I would say we don't need AI experts. As it so happens, by the way, I have repeatedly been trounced in my small startup on any conversation on AI by a 23-year-old Indian American girl from MIT, masters from MIT, who is very much an AI specialist. So within that 15%, there's certainly a lot who can do it. But my point is, in many ways, we don't want the specialist. I want every single one of us who's in financial services, both on the giving side and on the receiving side, frankly, we should be asking these questions. You are telling me that you are going to give me an advanced credit score based on data. Can you tell me what data? Okay, you can't tell me the exact secret formula. Can you tell me what that basis is? Can you show me some proof that that thing works? Those questions don't need AI knowledge. They need AI awareness. They need education about how data works. And that, I suspect, is what the purpose of sessions like this should be. And of course, this is a specialist crowd, but we should do more sessions like that. So I would say, Ajay, more than just diversity of hiring, extensive awareness and education around how data impacts everybody is just super, super critical. I think that would be the biggest single thing we can do. Of course, ensuring diversity is very important as well.
Well, ethical use of intelligence for decision making, I think, is becoming more and more prevalent now, Shameek. To your point, business logic that is embedded behind what data, where it's being used, how it's going to be applied, and the ethical use of data has become like a bit of a fabric and framework now. And more people are jumping at it. And you're right, these are different skill sets. One is a Python programmer who will write any script you want, but the business logic needs to be dictated by the end user. You're
absolutely, right? Absolutely. Sorry, Pritha, I don't know if we answered your question. You had a question there.
Thank you. With that, I would like to actually hand it over back to Sumit, who has a handful of questions. Shameek saying something, you went on mute.
No, I was just responding to one of the questions, but it looks like you are going to move to questions anyway, so that's fine. Please continue.
No, you can address it, and then I can move on.
No, I was just asking Pritha, did we answer your question? I mean, it's just one of the answers, is that one of the reasons why people are not keen to move away from human touch is because, frankly, we haven't proved conclusively that the machine works. But I don't know, there might be other, I mean, it's actually a discussion. Are there other reasons people see on why there is a reluctance to move? I certainly see this as a big reason, Pritha. Actually, when you are trying to replace something that exists already, and if you're brand new and you have not had any human alternative, then it's different. But if you're trying to replace an existing process, I think those of us pushing for the machine to win and the machine to be the superior thing have a little bit more work to do to convince others that yes, the machine indeed is superior. I don't think we've always done a very good job. I certainly haven't inside my banking days.
I think it's a good point. So in one of our surveys, I think there's about 48% of the survey respondents have said that we called it as digital alter ego. That means you are able to swap between human and machine decisions, and people are open for it. For example, today all the chatbot conversation are quite natural, right? So that there is exchange, or sometimes there's no human intervention. However, the expectation from consumers is you are able to explain to them when this switch happens and when such decisions are being made. So the important point here is to engage customers in those conversation and make it clear that where the decision has been made and how it has been made. I would think that there the difference lies, as opposed to just imposing as an outcome.
Yeah, agree.
Right. Yeah, and I think Shameek, like you said, in terms of really educating people, that's very important. Because some of the projects that we do for like mid-sized companies in the US, vis-a-vis the large corporates in India, it's amazing how the transformation is taking place there. Like whether it's in the healthcare industry or a retail industry, here we still have to pitch to the client on what is the value you may see, and almost like guarantee a model accuracy rate, which any data scientist would know that that's not something that we can do without even looking at the data, right? So I think there's a huge challenge in the understand. So everybody wants to get into analytics, wants to get into data science, but when it actually comes to starting a project, they want like a sure shot kind of an accuracy rate, and that this will work, as again something kind of visualizing what the output might be and the impact that it might have.
Yeah.
So I think what you said is right in terms of we have to constantly, I mean, a large part of our sales pitch is really actually giving them various scenarios about what other companies are doing and what are the results that they have seen.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Makes sense.
Reseau, you're spot on. We've undertaken a very large project with Motilal Oswal Securities just a week ago. And similar to you, I mean, there was this board level resistance at Motilal level itself. And we just turned around and said, you're sitting, hi, bacha, how are you? We sat there with the board and turned around and challenged status quo, saying, that's all fine, you don't have to. Let me tell you what's going to happen to you and your data sources and your reporting and your batch processing when you don't do data amalgamation. You're going to fail. You're going to have batch processes. You're going to have a huge flack from SEBI, Securities Exchange, for not being able to report. And more importantly, the new guys like Sher Khan and what have you are going to overtake you because they have a better handle on data rather than you do. And the project came through in 1 week. So if greed of utilization of data doesn't work, the fear factor of governance, risk, compliance, and failure, that could work. So
nice, we're gonna try that.
Sorry, that was it, Ajay. Sorry, I hijacked a bit. I wanted to cover the question.
Not a problem. Not a problem. So with that, I'd like to hand it over back to Sumit. who has a handful of questions that he has collected from participants. So Sumit, over to you.
Great. Thanks, Ajay. So I'll start with a couple of questions. So I have questions around like data security towards privacy and even a couple of opportunity side as well. So the first question which I have collected out here, which says is, what is the biggest hurdle for an organization to adopt big data analytics plus artificial intelligence within data in the current year 2021? And what strategy it can be used to solve that hurdle out here?
So who wants to go first? I'll have a go. I'll answer this question by asking a question. What is the one question you cannot ask Google and get a good answer? Anybody? It's what should I ask Google? That's the question. You can ask Google anything, but if you can't really ask Google, what is the thing I should be asking Google? So Sumit, my answer to that question always is the single biggest reason for an organization to be not following up on big data AI opportunities is complete cluelessness at the top on what exactly they can do with their data. If you don't know what you're looking for, generally saying I want to go after big data and AI is pointless. And that's why people like Cyrus and others can play a role to kind of make them aware, actually, if you don't do this, this will happen. So one of the main reasons that I've seen certainly in my bank over the last 7 years, but also in many other organizations, is certainly the fact that those are the top who are often making the decisions do not understand what they're looking for. And then it's a completely pointless exercise. That would be my vision.
Yeah, totally correct. Sumit, I mean, all of this hype that you hear is so unfounded. You know, somebody came back from a McKinsey forum and said, we need to go digital. I'm like, ooh, big words. What do you want to go digital with? What do you even define as digital? Cyrus, we are now embarking on an AI journey. I'm like, ooh, big words again. What's an AI journey? What are you trying to achieve out of the end result? Maybe you don't need that. You just need an old 1970s Teradata enterprise data warehouse where you store your data and apply some analytics. So different people hype it up differently. The understanding is different. So when you peel the onion a bit, you figure out the inhibitors are not knowing where artificial intelligence or analytics is applied in the enterprise. I want to sell more, you need that data or accurate data. I want to be able to report on time in near real time so that I don't get flagged from the regulators. That's data. So different uses of data need to be spelt out to the board. And that, I think, is the inhibitor, the lack of understanding. The 1970s, it was CRM. And after that, it was BPO. And now it's AI and artificial intelligence. It just
in between, there is cloud first, you know.
Correct.
Digital and cloud first. Look, I would think, based on what I've seen for the last few years now, so many different customers, but more or less the challenge is also the past experience. You know, the data projects, if you look at few years data projects that organizations have gone through, there's a feeling that they're not resulted in the value that one had claimed in the beginning of the project, right?
Very true.
So that means there is a hesitation that, you know, whom should I believe when I talk to, right? So is it I'm going to spend millions of dollars because somebody's saying this is the way you should do and you get all the good roses at the end, or I don't do anything. So I think there's a big problem in that space, and secondly, there's been fair bit of the operating model may not be the big word, but the failure of how you execute these within a complex large organization, right? So because there are power plays on which department or who owns data and what type of services that he or she will provide. Now, part of the problem is if it sits within one part of the organization, then the other part of the organization thinks that they are smarter than this organization, so they can do something on their own because they hear something different in the market, etc., etc. So I think these are some of the on the ground reality of organizations, why it's not so obvious or easy for the incumbents to excel in data as opposed to the big technology companies.
And that's not going to go away. Actually, this bickering and fight over data and who owns it and who should keep it is a perennial problem. Karen Fawcett, the head of global transaction banking in Stan Shameek's former colleague, ran one of the largest wholesale and transaction banking books in the world. And her claim to fame was ability to integrate data with corporates so that she can create a seamless view of their financial standing. That was data play. And she thought through the business plan first with Amol Dixit. And when they implemented it, it was an instant success. On the exact same thing, when Michael Goring, the group CIO, standardized on Temenos T24 core banking solutions, the one thing that failed miserably was their ability to integrate data and data lakes and data warehouses, which were very disparate, 26 different countries. They just didn't see the synergy. So here's one bank that saw extreme usage when data was accurately harnessed and applied, and the same bank failed miserably in retail because they were unable to identify the use of data. So perennial problem.
Absolutely, those were quite some amazing insights and quite a detailed summary of the whole challenge and how it can be solved to adopt data problems. So moving ahead towards, I wanted to further discuss more about data privacy and data leakages. So we have seen so many number of organizations in the past couple of months within India as well. A couple of fintechs as well had to face data leakage issues. A lot of tech organizations had to face the data leakage issues. So it's a two-part question. Number one being, how do you prevent at a early stage or at a growth stage fintech organization, how do you prevent the data leakage and make sure the privacy is secure? And number two thing being, in case if that kind of a leakage happens, how do as an organizational level, how do we own it up in a better way, at a more professional way, in front of the regulators, in front of the market, in front of your customers and all the other stakeholders?
I guess this is good times as well, so I'll start, Sumit. But I think these are two different things, and people often confuse the two. A data leak is basically a result of malactors and or poorly thought through, potentially criminal criminal negligence in designing your safety protocols, right, and then your security system. That is a data security issue. It happens that it's personal data, then it'll be privacy, but you can also have non-personal data. You can have systems getting locked out, as you've seen with many of that. And there is no, that's an arms race, and I think there are other people on this call who would be better placed than me to talk about that. But that's an arms race. The ones who are trying to breach your data only have to succeed once. You have to succeed every one of the other 999 times, and that needs to be done. The privacy piece is separate. I mean, there's an angle of privacy being compromised if a data leakage happens, but a lot of privacy breaches happen not because there's an explicit breach, but because you've designed processes in a way where from day one you've built a model or you built a process that does not pay enough attention to protecting privacy, or indeed you've gone and built a business that is completely predicated on you getting access to personal data. And I think we should acknowledge the two things differently. I mean, the latter, I don't think any company goes out of its way to say, I'm going to build a really easy to hack system, which should be easy to leak, or that I'm going to let my employees really go out and release their data. I think that's just a matter of discipline, continuous effort, etc. But the former, the privacy piece, is trickier. I don't think half the people understand the privacy implications of what they're suggesting. I think the other half doesn't care about the privacy implications of what they're suggesting. And I think that is, again, where a mix of regulation and more thoughtful, particularly if you're a large financial institution, you do have to worry about that, because ultimately, more than your data, the trust people have in you is your biggest asset, even more than the data. So I think it would be useful, in my view, to treat these two problems separately. But that's my my 2 cents.
Thanks. What about you, Cyrus? What do you think about this piece when it comes to this whole question around data?
Again, exactly as Shameek said, I mean, these are multifacets. If there is data at play, there will be attacks and hacks, and there's no but and if about that. It all depends on what sort of security layers you apply. Data in transit is data in danger. If I send you a WhatsApp and I accidentally put my image of my credit card, that can be intercepted regardless of the encryption. That's data in transit. So who's liable? HDFC, my banker, WhatsApp, Facebook, the owner, I personally, the person that emitted the data. So there are multifacets to data security. But the fact remains, every data set is vulnerable depending on how much security you apply. The more it is, the more closed off the data, and hence you can't use it within your API orchestration layer. You're not able to, and every time you will have to opt in, opt in, opt in. Are you okay to share data with Google? Yes. Are you okay for LinkedIn to have a peak? Yes, yes, yes. So that becomes a little cumbersome. If you're gregarious and live large and emit and buy a lot of stuff, you are exposing yourself vulnerably, which is why I use the magical word opt-in. If you have opted in to share your data with a large ecosystem, the vulnerability and the threats will go up. Now comes the point where this ethical use of data. Can I intentionally, as Netflix, farm out my entire family data to people who are inconsequential to my ecosystem, like a streaming or a sales agent? The answer is no, I did not opt in. So there are multiple facets to data ownership, data security, the framework that you apply for security, how secure and how tightly you want to firewall that data. All that depends on institutions and the use of data, that way. So yeah, it's a topic by itself. Sumit, data security, applicability of various data standards and security standards. But the fact remains, you still need that guard with the gun outside your branch, because there is money in the world. So that data security is not going to go away.
Absolutely. That's absolutely a good summary from your side. Sudhir, what about your 2 cents on this point?
Look, I'm only going to say that the complexity of sensitive data management, data leakage is only going to increase given the sheer underneath infrastructure. We talk about now, multi-cloud and internal data, external data, and it is only going to go more than what you can see today. So, and it's not there's not an easy or direct answer. Even if you look at the various monitoring techniques, data value chain monitoring, confidentiality, encryption, decryption, each of these areas in its own right is fairly complex. And not to forget that when we are talking about all these things, there might be the next wave that we can see about be it cryptocurrencies, be it these virtual currency exchanges, distributed network with different parts of the world coming with this decentralized finance. So unimaginable amount of data exchange is going to come. So I think we need to watch out this space and figure out what to do and how to do it over a period of time.
Absolutely, absolutely. And when we discuss more about decentralized finance and a couple of use cases around blockchain and financial service, there is a lot more data play, and I guess that's a point towards a different conversation. But moving ahead with the whole conversation out here, we discussed about a couple of hurdles. We discussed about privacy leakages. Now I want to like lastly point out towards the opportunities which is there in this whole segment. So when we see all sorts of emerging economies, there is a large number of unstructured data which gets generated at a user level, at an organizational level, at country level, across segments. So if someone as a fintech founder, if he's sitting out here in one of the emerging economies, what use case they can build, what sort of products they can look up to start building from now on, which can be easily scalable in the next few years. Hello, was my question audible?
Sorry,
Yes,
was
it
that
was. But who?
There are way too
Sure.
many way too many use cases. So we are thinking.
Yeah. So how about
Let's
let's pick up one use case each. Sudhir, let's start with you. Let's pick up one use case from your side. If as a fintech founder, if someone has to build a product around data, what use case someone can start picking up?
I think probably this question is a bit generic and vague, to be honest, because we need to slice and dice this in multiple ways. So, but very recently in the COVID situation, I've seen increasing use cases around customer engagement areas. So, which is primarily the contact center management. There are heaps of applications, queries coming to customers, which is overloaded, at least in the geographies that I live. It is becoming hard for banks to even respond and manage. So anything that a data and AI-led use case can help in this space will be good. So that will continue in my view. Similarly, when you map it, the heaps of back office efficiencies are still essential for enterprises which are built on data. That area is again automation and back office efficiency use cases will continue. The usual ones are also important to look at more around frictionless, we say, right? So things around onboarding. I've even seen sudden surge in natural language generation areas. How do you create different kinds of analytics, report out to regulators and so on? So across the board, front, middle, back office, there are plenty of use cases at this moment, but these are some of the things that I'm hearing.
Maybe I have a simpler one. I would say don't focus on the use of data and AI. Actually, no, I'll give you two. I'll cheat. One on the data side, I think there is still, despite some crowding out there, there's a good opportunity in data and analytics applied to climate change, and it's particular about using IoT and data, to a lesser extent, simpler analytics, not so much AI, to really understand the impact that our economic activities has on the environment in a credible way. Otherwise, we're having all these conversations about net zero, etc., ESG. All of that means nothing if you don't have credible data on the effect. So that I would say is a good opportunity. But the other one is, I would say, don't do anything about using data and AI. I think, Cyrus, you mentioned consent management and how difficult it can be. The company or group of companies that cracks how to make individual consent on data scalable, user-friendly, automatable, so that you don't have to go every site and give your consent, and companies don't have to check multiple times, but can somehow work off a central register, if one would think like that, and somehow you can automate the entire process of keeping data personal. I think that is going to be super important. In the end, that's all that matters. Each one of us ultimately cares finally about our own personal data more than perhaps even money. And I think that's a great opportunity. So you can call it trust technology, if you will. I don't know. I don't know, Cyrus, what do you think?
Absolutely spot on. In fact, future of trust is a whole practice that we have incorporated within our go-to-market, and future of trust, like future of work and future of data, is around the ownership and the ethical use. I keep using that word liberally, ethical use of data, which is becoming more and more prevalent because the entire world is now very data-driven rather than personal touch-driven. So yeah, Sumit, to your point, each industry and each startup should have a what business problem are you going to solve with your analytics or your data kind of a roadmap. If you're selling to Singapore Airlines, it's the right offer to the right person at the right time, at the right price point, at the right location, and so many other facets that come from data. If you're Nomura Securities, you're sitting there analyzing the fluctuation of Bitcoin, which needs zettabytes of data being analyzed so that you can put a predictive score around that. If you're FICO or Fair Isaac of the old times, you're constantly improving credit scoring around individuals who are spending a fair bit. So the use of analytics and data analytics and artificial intelligence all stems from what large or small business problem your solution as a startup can solve. And that's really where the key success would be. If you can zoom into a model, like Sudhir said, customer onboarding, that's a model. Policy creation in insurance, that's a model. Extreme automation around claims management and auto claims management, which are very fraudulent and can be mitigated with various intelligent tool sets. That's a model. So what business model are you going to solve? And that will enable your success as a startup, I think.
That's really amazing, and it's a great summary from your side. And rightly, as Sudhir mentioned, now it all depends on what use case and within which business vertical a startup is trying to focus and trying to solve a right problem statement for them. So with that, I guess I briefly covered up major questions which I had received from a few audience, and I will like to hand over the mic to Ajay. And Ajay, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sumit, for picking up those questions and getting them addressed. And I'd like to thank Cyrus, Shameek, Sudhir, and Frank for the 90 minutes that you have spent with us, deliberating, discussing topics, and also taking some of the questions. So thank you so much for being wonderful speakers, panelists, and sharing those insights. And yes, it's definitely some of the points probably by themselves have a talk or a discussion that we can probably schedule sometime down the road, and we'll definitely reach out to you. I've already received a handful of messages from a bunch of folks who want to connect with Cyrus and Shameek, and I'll take that offline and I'll reach out and figure out how we can go about doing it. But thank you for the wonderful audience, and thank you to our speakers as well, and look forward to keeping in touch and reconnecting.
Thank you.
Be well, be safe.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much.